Hi everyone, it's Kay and I'm back with another video. I thought today would be a great time to talk about my writing process, how I get from here to here. Now, before I get into the thick of it, I did just want to make a quick announcement. I wanted to let you know that the ebook version of Limited Truth, which is the first book of my YA sci-fi series, is free, and it's free everywhere. So I figured if you want to see, what it's all about and if I'm actually like okay at writing, well, now you can for free. So, all right. I will say I was not always this organized. I feel like definitely since I started writing in Trine, and really more so since I've gone indie, that I've been using this system and it really seems to work for me. And it could be that a couple years from now, what I do for my writing process might be different and maybe we'll revisit it. But I have it as 14 steps. I feel like most of them are pretty straightforward. So without further ado, here we go. So I realized going back through that I deleted the part of the video that said what step one was, and step one was to get the idea. I have very vivid dreams, and usually I'm able to remember them. And with Enshrine, Limited Truth, and this new project that I'm working on, they were all dreams first. For example, with Enshrine, I had a dream that somebody was chasing me and I knew that I had to get away from them or it was going to be really, really bad. And somebody came and they helped me, and I woke up as we were trying to escape. And I was really excited and couldn't stop thinking about it. So I got to the point that when this happened, that I started writing them down so that I could come back to them at a later date. So that pretty much leads me into step two. My step two is writing it down, that initial idea I had from the dream, or in those rare instances, I did a project for NaNoWriMo last year that wasn't a dream, that it was like a hypothetical situation. And same thing, I was like, well, I probably won't forget, but maybe I should write it down just to be sure. So sometimes I write it down on my phone, or this notebook before I started having it be for my new sci-fi idea had like little snippets of ideas that I hope to get back to at some point. So whatever helps you remember those ideas and come back to them. It's good to have it even by the side of your bed when you wake up. The third step for me is visualization. If I find a project that I'm really, really excited about, I had the dream for this one a long time ago, and I don't want to like spill too much about it before I really start writing it, but I had a dream that I was seeing this blue light in the woods, and I knew that somebody was out there, and long story short, it's evolved into like a whole sci-fi alien romance sort of thing, but that's because I kept on thinking about it. And I get to the point where I like visualize the scenes in my head, sometimes while I'm driving. I don't know if other authors are like this, but I find that I have a lot of thinking time like when I'm in the shower, and sometimes I even like, this is gonna make me sound nuts, but I have like these dialogues with the characters while I'm taking a shower. So I feel like I see those scenes and I get those lines of dialogue that I really want to have from visualizing and picturing it over and over and over again, that when I finally do sit down to write, it's been like living in my brain for months and sometimes even years. There were parts of Squad Trouble, especially like the last book, that it was a long time till I finally wrote them out, and it was kind of like cathartic almost when the time finally came. The fourth step for me is one that I'm currently doing, and that is outlining. And I know that there's different ways that people do their outlining. I know I've tried to follow like the plotting things that Sarah Cannon has, and that's pretty good for me for like a general outline, but I tend to be really detailed when it comes to my outlines. That way when I come back to it, all those parts that maybe I didn't rehearse in my head beforehand kind of all mesh together and it all kind of flows. Before I started doing this, I typically did not finish manuscripts, and now it's like a Bible for me, and I feel like it keeps me on track. When I just finished Enshrine Sequel, I had it all typed out, like by scene. This one's a little bit different. Again, I don't want to give too much away, but I'm doing this one by like point of view. So I have like my Raya scenes and my Cole scenes, and I write what I want to happen. Like I assume it will probably be a chapter, but it could be scenes too. And I kind of go back and forth with that. I'm trying to do the whole series, which has been a little tedious, but I'm almost done. I'm on the last book right now. But anyway, like I said, I find that I try to be really detailed with my outline, and then that way when I'm writing, I tend to have my notebook, or like with Eminence, I had a whole like stack of papers that I would consult and go through to make sure that I was on track. Now, that being said, there are some times where I do this and then my character is going to sound crazy again, do something totally out of left field, and then this is like, it's irrelevant, but it's at least getting me to that point where the characters can call the shots. So this step is crucial for me. I would be probably not published if it was not for this, because even Enshrine had a very detailed, like almost notebook full of outline notes. My fifth step is pretty obvious. It's the rough draft. It's just the writing. And I try to just brain dump. Using my notes, I write as much as I can, knowing that I'm going to go back and I'm going to probably fix a lot of it and it might be crap. I try not to reread it. Like sometimes like life gets in the way and I'm not writing for a while. I will sometimes go back and reread just to get myself more familiar about where I was, or maybe get myself excited again. But typically I try to not read it until I get to a further step, because that way it's like looking at it fresh and getting excited about it all over again. In a perfect world, I like to write like a chapter or a scene at a time, usually around at least 1,000 words. There are some days where I can do a lot more than that. Recently, I had a weekend where nothing was going on and I got maybe like 10,000 words in a weekend, which is, phenomenal. But then I also have days where, I think I said it in my author tag video, that if I get 500 words, like that's a victory. And like school starts in a week and I'm already like dreading that all my productivity is gonna go, but what can you do? The next step is really hard for me and I don't always follow it. But once I finally get that whole entire rough draft done, the next thing I do is take some time off from writing, and it's really hard. I find writing like really relaxing. Like I could do it every day. I mean, obviously I want to be a full-time author, so it's something that I enjoy doing. So sometimes I make myself take like the weekend off or even longer, and I'm like, I don't know what to do with myself. I'm like, I should be doing something. So for example, I finished the Enshrine sequel a couple weeks ago, and then I took the week off before I started going back in and taking notes to get ready for revisions. All right, step 7 is I take my manuscript and I usually read it on my tablet, because I feel like I can do that in bed or like sitting on the couch with my son, and it's not as big and clunky as the laptop. And I read it and I take notes. I try to be more content conscious and less about the grammar and stuff, but sometimes, like, let's say I use the same word 3 times in a sentence, I make a note of it. But a lot of it is usually, more, what about this character's reaction? And I find that I try to be as self-deprecating as possible, mostly just to amuse myself, but I don't know. I just feel like the harsher I am, the more likely I'm going to be to want to change and fix things. So I do try, like, humorously to make notes about, like, wow, that sucked, or that's the best you could do. And I don't know, maybe that's not the right message to tell you, but I don't know. It's kind of funny when I have to go back and revise. All right, the next step, which I think is 8, after I read and take notes, I go back and I start editing. And I go chapter by chapter, looking at the notes I made, adding more detail or tweaking things slightly. And I try to do like a chapter a day or a scene a day. That way I can really focus and get through. And typically I find that I add maybe 10,000 words to my word count. Usually the plot is pretty solid when I start editing, just because, like I said, I do like brain dump a lot, but Sometimes I add scenes too. Usually my first revision is content heavy, and then if I go through again, it's more of the grammatical and the polishing kind of stuff. I did say for step 9 to repeat steps 7 through 8 as I need it, because I want it to be as good as it can be, cohesive and able to be read before I send it to betas, which is step 10. All right, so yes, you finish your book, you think that it's good enough, and you want other people to read it too. So you send it to beta readers. I didn't always do this. This is another one of those things that I don't think that it necessarily makes or breaks me, but I think it is sometimes good to know like other people's opinions. That being said, I take it with a grain of salt. I have 3 betas. They read all of these for me, and I feel like I got 3 different opinions. And if I tried to cater to all 3, my head would have exploded. So I try to, look for things, glaring issues that like all 3 betas would say. But like, for example, Cassie's mom is a bit much. And I have one beta who like can't stand the mom, like whatever she does, like whatever my justification for her actions, like it will never be good enough. I'm not willing to change her mother's personality. So that is something that this beta didn't like. I kind of explained why the mom did what she did. She was not satisfied, but it's like with readers, you can't make everybody happy. And if it's what I want and I feel passionately about, I appreciate her input. But at the end of the day, it's your story. So take what they say with a grain of salt. But betas are helpful. I feel like step 11 is one of those like have an asterisk next to it, because you might not necessarily need this in all situations, but let's say your betas did find something that was like kind of a big problem, you would go back and tweak and then go on to the next step. So when I first had these with my old publisher, I switched between first and third person for the point of views, and that I ended up going back and changing once I had the rights back, because it was just not something normally seen, and I feel like it's better for it now. So that's an example of when you would actually change it. Step 12 is sending it off to my editor and proofreader. My proofreader is actually my mother-in-law, but she's like fantastic. Typically, I try to get everything content-wise as good as it can be, but I struggle with like commas and grammatical things. So I pay for like a proofreader or a line editor to make sure that I'm putting commas in the right spots, or maybe I'm using the right words. And sometimes, I think I've mentioned previously that I have issue with tenses sometimes, so my line editor helps with that. I may do a video about editing in the future, so I'll leave it for there for now, but I do pay somebody to look at it line by line. After that, she doesn't do it all the time, but I do have somebody that proofreads to make sure that I didn't miss anything, because it does always seem like you go back later or somebody messages you and they're like, hey, did you know that you forgot the word and on page 205? And you're like, I read this 100 times. How is that possible? We know the story by heart. That like we're not really like reading it as much as we're like remembering. I think having a proofreader definitely helps with that. One of the final steps that I do before I click publish is I use a formatting software to make everything look pretty and appealing. So when I first switched to being indie, formatting was a nightmare, but I have since invested in, a publishing course, honestly, but I use Draft2Digital and Kindle Create for formatting now, and it makes everything nice and clean, and like, instead of me trying to click enter the right amount of times, like look at it, says my name, and it says the name of the book. And I know on the Kindle as well, it's very, it looks professional. So I always make sure that everything's formatted and looks good. I always, in the previewer on the various vendors, make sure that, all the chapter headings are where they're supposed to be, because, it's a reflection of you, and you want people to be happy with their purchase and not disappointed. All right, and then that last step is you publish it. I try, and again, I can get into a whole nother video about this as well, where you want to promote yourself, and that's something that I'm still learning about. But you're not done once you click publish. But that pretty much is my writing process. Okay, I think that's it for me this week. If you have anything to say about my writing process, I would love to hear about it. If you have a writing process that's different than mine, I'd also love to hear about it, because maybe I'm missing out on something that's going to make my life a lot easier and I just don't know. So, as always, thanks, and I'll see you soon. Bye.